Hi, my name is Yujing Wu. I'm head of developer evangelism at Samsung ARTIK Cloud. We also have Yujing Wu, our senior engineer and evangelist, who is going to walk through the code in building an IoT app for Android. So let's get started. First, I just wanted to give you an overview of the ARTIK Cloud Challenge overview, and then Yujing will discuss your first Android app. She'll break down the code, what the app looks like, walking through the implementation, and then the last part of it will answer some questions you may have. So our ARTIK Cloud Challenge for IoT, it's been going on for a couple of months, and it will end the end of September. I'm really excited. We have a lot of participants. We have bounties. We reward developers every week. And so for the ARTIK Cloud bounty, it's very simple what to do. You sign up with ARTIK Cloud, you create a new device type, and you use your device to connect one instance of the device type to ARTIK Cloud. And we award 2 winners every week $100. And we'll do that up until the end of the challenge, which will be September 30th. So we also have our ARTIK Cloud Challenge, where you will build a new IoT application that connects 2 or more devices in our cloud services from our Works With list as well as our Most Wanted list, and create at least one rule to have a smart interaction between these devices and our cloud services. And we're really excited to announce our Cloud Challenge with Arduino. So what you can do, for those of you who have created an Arduino project, you can just connect it to ARTIK Cloud, or start a new project using Arduino board and ARTIK Cloud. We have some great prizes where you get about, I believe it's like $1,000, and 500 ARTIK Cloud credit, as well as Arduino board and an ARTIK module. So again, these contests will end at the end of September. We're really looking forward to seeing your entries, and if you have any questions, feel free to email us at developer@artic.cloud. So I'm going to pass over the presentation to Yujing, who will discuss our first Android app.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yujing. I'm going to talk about how we implement the first Android application to interact with ARTIK Cloud. First, we will look at what this application do, what it looks like. Then we walk through how to set up your local development environment, so that once you check out the code from GitHub, you can build this application, use it. At the end, we will walk through some code, talk about some implementation details. So for this Android applications, build this Android application, you will learn that how to implement logic to implement OAuth implicit method to get the user token. Then how to use that user token to set up the API so that you can get user info from ARTIK Cloud and send the data to ARTIK Cloud, also receive data from ARTIK Cloud. This application uses ARTIK Cloud Java Android SDK, which significantly simplifies development. At the end of this presentation, we will share the link to this app's repository, also the link to the article. In this presentation, I may skip some details, but if you read our articles, all the details, necessary details, all listed there. So what does this app look like? What does it do? This is very simple Android application. It has first screen is basically show up the login button. You click login button, it will never present the ARTIK Cloud login screen. You provide your credential, then log into the ARTIK Cloud. If this is the first time you use this tutorial application to log into ARTIK Cloud, then you will see the Hello ARTIK Cloud, the grant permission screen. This permission screen is basically ask you, the user, the grant permission to the application. It requires read and write data permission from the device of the device type called semi-gigabit. Semi-gigabit is the device type we are going to use in this sample application. Also, it asks to read the login user profile information. You must click Allow in order to continue to use this sample application. After you log in, then you will show this Play with ARTIK Cloud screen. The first line shows up welcome, the account name, the login user's full name. Then you can click send a message, which will send a message to the ARTIK Cloud on behalf of the device, which device ID is hard-coded in the source code. And you also click get latest message. It will get the message from ARTIK Cloud, which is sent by that source device. On the right side of the screen, it already shows example what response looks like for the send message and for the get message. Okay, now we are ready to talk about how to set up your development environment. First, make sure that you have the right tool installed. Then we need to do setup at ARTIK Cloud, also set up at Android project. This is an Android application, so you must have the Android Studio installed. And also we use this Java Android SDK, ARTIK Cloud SDK. Let's go to our SDK site to take a look at this SDK. We host this Java SDK at GitHub, Arcticloud-java. In the repository, you will see the source code of SDK. You can follow instructions to build this SDK, or you can get build jar file from Marvin Central. And how to use this SDK depends on the use case. If your project is Java project, you add these dependencies into the POM file, specifies which SDK's name and which version. And if you use this SDK in your Android application, like this tutorial, you will need this line of the code into your Android project build file. For this tutorial, we use 2.0.3 SDK. Okay, so let me go back to my presentation. To set up at ARTIK Cloud, first you need to create an application. Get the application ID at ARTIK Cloud developer dashboard. Then, second step, you need to connect a device of the semi-gigabit device type at user portal, so that the Android application can send data on behalf of this device. Then you need to also get device ID of that device at user portal. Only the first step is must required for all the applications that interact with ARTIK Cloud. The second and third step is only relevant to the specific application. So in this case, it's only relevant to our tutorial. Now I'm going to go to the developer dashboard and user portal to show some details about setup. This is our ARTIK Cloud developer dashboard. The application I'm creating for this tutorial is my first Android app. I'm not going to walk through the application creation process because that is straightforward. If you follow our documentation, you know how to do it. So I'm going to skip those details. Instead, I want to let you pay attention to a few setup. The first setup is app info. The app infos in the authorization method, you must select the second one. The reason is this Android application use OAuth implicit method, so you must include implicit method. Second thing is that you must pay attention to the redirect URL. Make sure you set it exactly same as what's shown here. In the tutorial article, it will give you exact show this URL. Make sure you set it correctly because the Android app is hard-coded this redirect URL. Another important setup is about the permissions. For any application, at minimum, you must set profile to read. Otherwise, your application is not usable. Depending on applications, you need to choose proper device type to ask a proper permission. For this tutorial app, we use semi-gigabit. So that's why I choose this semi-gigabit device type. And I also, the application need to read and write information. So I make sure I click the true. Okay, so this is the important setup in the application. And once you set up application, if you click as show client ID and secret, it will show the client ID. And those are a client ID you need to copy and paste it into your Android project. So we are done with the developer dashboard. Let's go to the user portal. It's on my Arcticloud. I already have this connected device. For you, you need to click connect another device and choose semi-gigabit, create a device, connect the device here. I'm not going to show that process. Instead, I'm going to use the one already collected called gigabit test device. If I click settings, it will show me the device information of this connected device. I check the device type is correct, semi-gigabit, and here is the device ID. I need to get this copy this device ID into my Android source code. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. We already showed those details at how to set up Arcticloud. The third part of our preparation is to set up Android project. You only need to provide your client ID information, copy that to the main activity. Then you also need to copy your device ID information to the message activity. I'm going to show you in my Android project. In the main activities, I copy paste my client ID, put it here. And for the message activities, I copy and paste my device ID from user to the user portal and paste it. So that's it about how to set up. Now I'm ready to walk through the implementation details. I want to talk about three details. First is how to implement OAuth implicit method so that you can get application can get access token. Then we will talk about how to use access token to set up API calls. At last, we will talk about how to make the 3 REST API call: get user info, post message, and get message. Before I show you my code, let me go to remind you what UI looks like. The first 3 UIs, the implementations, is coded in the main activity, and the second, the rest of the screen is coded in the activity message activity. So now I'm going to this Android Studio. In the main activities, I needed to implement a login screen and catch the access token. I use the web view. Once I load web view, in the web view, I load the URL. This URL is a GET call to the ARTIK Cloud, account server. In this call, in this URL, you need to provide client ID, redirect URL. Then after the applications make this API call, then it will show the login screen, and if it's the first time, it also shows the permission granting screen. After all this menu interaction finished, then Arcticloud account server will call back the Android applications. This callback has a format like this. I highlighted. The first part is redirect URL. It starts with redirect URL. Since my Android application knows what redirect URL, so I can able to catch this callback. Then in the callback, I extract access token. Once the main activity get access token, it will start second activity, message activity, and passing access token. So now we are ready to move on to message activities. In the message activities, once you start, you need to set up Arcticloud API. Arcticloud API, you create API client. All these objects is from the SDK libraries. You pass in the access token, which you get from the main activity, and you set up the API client. For this tutorial, we use two sets of APIs. One called users API, one called message API. So that's why here the two lines of code to prepare these two sets of API. Okay, so I'm set up the API client properly. The next, I'm ready to commit the three API calls. The first API call is get user info. Get user info is implemented in this method. It is users API, so it's called the user API. The method is called getSelf, and it uses a synchronized method. This means that you can call this API the main UI thread, and under hood it creates a background thread to make the networking call. Once it's success, Arcticloud callback. Once it's success, the Arcticloud will call back this unsuccess API. A callback will be called. The result contains the user info, and from the user info we extract the full then it show up in the UI. And beyond that, we also store this user ID. Without user ID, the rest of two API we cannot make a call. Okay, so next we will able to post message. If the user click the send message, it comes to the post message API call. It comes to this method called post message. What this message does, it constructs a message and sends to Arcticloud on behalf of this device we specified by the device ID. This payload of data payload information looks like the data payload information looks like this. How do I know what data field look like? Because I know which device type I'm creating, I know it's REST, I know it's manifest, so that I know what data field look like, what value it is. After set data payload, then I create the message, start in the payload, and also set the device ID, set source device ID to the artist. Once I make this call, the Arcticloud knows which device these messages are associated. The message API call is very simple. I use message API and I call send message action. Again, I use a synchronized call. Once it's success, it will on message. Sorry, I don't know why it's jump. Okay. On success will be called. From here, we extract the Arcticloud response, show that in the UI. Next, I want to discuss how to get latest message. It's similar. It's very straightforward. We use the SDK. I call this message API, and I call it get normalized message method. Again, I use a synchronized version. I request only one message part. One success, the result, which is message, the latest message will return to the Android application. I extract this information and show up in the UI. So that is pretty much how we can how we log in and get access token and make the 3 API call. Next, I'm going to demo that. Let me click run to demo it. I'm going to run it in the physical device I connected. I click OK. Okay, and show you. So this login screen shows up. I click login. So now I need to copy my account. Now here let me stop showing the screen for a while. Let me finish typing my credentials. I will share the screen again. I'm typing my credentials. Okay, so I'm back. So I log in. You will see that it's welcome, the full name I use with my account. Now I can send a message. Send a message. Okay, I got a response. Response is message ID. Let me click get the latest message. Okay, I got a response. The date information is listed here, and I also noticed that the message ID I get is the exact same as the message ID I sent. So it means I just get the message I sent just now. Let me go back to my presentation. So far, we have been walked through the implementation, talk about how to get access token, how to set up the API call, how to perform 3 API call. I think that's it. It's very straightforward to create this first Android application to interact with Arcticloud. Now we are in the Q&A session. So, Jimmy, can you?
Okay, that's
So
great.
this session.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of questions, I've already answered them. Restrictions to which 2 devices are valid to connect. Okay, so should it be from the most wanted list, or can we have our own developed devices? If it's not on either of the lists, you can just email us at developer@arctic.cloud for approval. And we also have a question from Pradeep. So is the Arctic environment contained only to Android, or are there any future considerations for iOS and Windows?
Okay, I can answer that question. Arcticloud basically is the cloud is date, let's say, operation system agnostic. So it means you can create Android application to interact with Arcticloud or iOS application and or web application. It really doesn't matter. It just expose the API. And if you go to our developer documentation, you will see that under the samples, it also shows iOS sample application. So yeah, in short, that you can create any type of application to interact with Arcticloud whenever you use its API, and iOS, Swift, and all these are possible.
Yes, and also just to let you know, we have 9 SDKs that have recently been released that we're in the process of verifying right now. So as Yujing said before, check out our documentation under tools. It'll show SDKs as well. And okay, may I know your name? Okay, you can email developer@arctic.cloud goes to myself and Yujing. So we get all the emails. And somebody raised their hand. Abhishek, do you have a question you'd like to type in? Or we can unmute you. Anything? Okay. Okay, so those are all the questions for now.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have the links to share?
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
where you can get them? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, this is a link. This is a link.
Oh no, click.
Okay. So this is a link. And this tutorial link is on our developer documentation. This tutorial, your first Android app. And so the applications, the source code is hosted at GitHub, and on the Arcticloud is tutorial Android, your first app. We also have the SDK, Android SDK. It's linked to Android SDK, and we believe that this documentation, how to use REST API to interact with Arcticloud, is also important. So we listed it under our documentation. Connect the data, REST, and the web sockets.
Okay, great. So that's all the questions I have for now, and well, everyone has for now. Thank you so much, Yujing, and everyone. Oh wait, there's another question. Is there any C library for the API?
For that, yeah, we have planned to generate C libraries. So stay tuned for that. We have the plan for that.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to email us at developer@arctic.cloud. And thank you so much. Stay tuned for upcoming webinars. We have one coming up with Arduino as well as Hexaware. And then we're going to have some Q&A webinars. We'll have a bunch of webinars in September to prepare you for the Arctic Cloud Challenge. But thank you again. Thank you, Yujing, and happy coding.